Welcome back to another session. Today we'll be continuing the financial accounting cycle. However, we'll be taking a look at adjustments and errors. So, correcting entries, and these are for our errors. Correcting entries are journal entries made to correct an error in a previously recorded transaction. Examples of correcting errors include correcting an erroneous amount used when recording a previous transaction. So what this is saying is that you're correcting an amount, so that amount was a mistake, it was an error that you recorded in a previous transaction. Another example of correcting entries is to move an amount from an incorrect account, right? So you had previously recorded it to the wrong account. So you might have recorded an expense and you put it in a revenue account, right? So you're correcting that, you're moving it from that incorrect account to the correct account. So those are a few correcting entries. Those are a few correcting errors, right? And or adjusting entries. Or adjusting entries are recorded or are required when changes in a certain account have not been recorded in the accounting records, right? Examples of that includes reporting expenses or loss with the related liabilities or transactions that have occurred but not yet recorded in the ledgers. And the same is true for if you're recording revenues or gains. Our focus today is on correcting entries. So we're correcting errors that were made. In our next video, we'll be looking at adjusting entries and the more complete questions incorporating possibly both, right? So our question for today, we have the trial balance of linked company. As evident and as is stated, it is not balanced. And we know that in order for our final account or final financial statements to be correct, or trial balance must be balanced, right? So we're noting that we have to the side that we have a few errors that were detected, right? So these errors should help us to balance or trial balance once we finish with them, right? So you have your errors from A to G, and the requirement state the journal entries necessary to correct the errors made. And 2, after you've done that, you're going to be preparing the trial balance for the period. But before we go any further, let's just do a little recapping, right? So we're looking at our financial accounting cycle, and we're remembering from last week where we started. The financial cycle starts with a business transaction. Then you record in your journals, then you post to your ledger. After you've posted to your ledger and you would have closed them, you would have extracted your unadjusted trial balance. Then you move to your adjustments. After you finish your adjustments, you'll then go to your adjusted trial balance. And from there is where you prepare your final accounts. We would have excluded adjustments in our previous video. However, right now we're looking at adjustments, and the adjustments that we're looking at are correcting entries or errors. So remember I said in this portion of adjustments, it's like starting over the accounting cycle, because in doing your adjustments, you have to do your entries, your journal entries, as the question required us to do. In doing journal entries, you therefore need to post those to a ledger. Then you'll have to close those ledger to get your balancing figure, which is what would be taken to your adjusted trial balance. So we'll be doing a little bit of that here right now for this question. So as we note, we have the trial balance, and this is the place that we're starting. We're starting, and the first thing that we need to do is to find the difference. Find the difference of what? Remember, in your trial balance, you have a debit side and a credit side. So because we know it's not balanced, we need to find that difference there. And the difference here that we have by subtracting or 76,700 from the credit side from the 84,300 on the debit side gives us $7,600, right? So that is our difference. what do we do with this difference? We open a suspense account, a suspense T account with this difference, right? And we place this difference that we found in our trial balance, right, on the side of the lesser from the trial balance. So if you would note, the side that had the least amount was our credit side from our trial balance, right? So in our suspense account, we're going to be putting that difference that we found on the credit side of our suspense account. Note, this suspense account is a temporary account. And after you've corrected, after you've done and journalized and made room for all the errors that were detected, this account should self-balance. You shouldn't have to be closing it in the order that we know how to close an account, all right? But we'll see it as we go along. So we've made our suspense account, we open it. So if we open it, it means that we're gonna be putting things in it based on all errors that we have, right? So as the question said, we need to journalize and do the updated trial balance. So let's journalize and afterwards close the suspense account. So remember, when we're journalizing, we would have done our regular posting to our leisure. So we'll be doing that simultaneously, right? So going back to the question, but this time we're focusing on the errors A to G. So the first error says the cash balance is overstated by 1,000. So let's look here at cash. We're seeing where cash has a debit balance of 6,200. It is saying this is overstated. It should not be 6,200, right? It's overstated by 1,000, so it should be 6,200 minus 1,000, right? Which would give us 5,200. How do we record this? How do we record for the balance in cash to be $1,000 less, right? We know that cash is an asset. And when asset increases, we debit, right? So we would have debited $1,000 more than we should have. So to take out that, to reduce an asset account, we need to credit. So we know to make cash what it should be, we're going to have to credit it. But what's the other side of the transaction? So remember, for your errors, right, it would have been previously recorded, or a part of it would have been previously recorded and possibly another part was not. So the next entry of an error goes to suspense, right? So in this case, we'd be debiting our suspense account, the $1,000, and crediting cash, $1,000. Our journal entries are mainly focused on the suspense because we would have known how to journalize in our other T accounts, but here we're specifically showing the journal entries in our suspense account. So here we're seeing for A, you have on the debit side of the suspense, you have the 1,000. You can always open each individual account, but you'll be doing that on your own this time around. So we've recorded the first error and we've corrected it. The next one, rent expense of $350 was erroneously posted as a credit rather than a debit. Okay, what does this look like? So rent, this is the error. It was posted as a credit of $350, but it should have been a debit of $350 because rent expense, right? Remember rent expense? When it increases, you debit, right? But here we're saying we're crediting rent expense. So how do we make what's on our left, right? The current error look like what should be on our right. So first, we will have to cancel the error, right? So you're gonna have to debit $350, and this $350 cancels what the error that you would have done. But remember, you want it to look like what's on our right with a debit of $350. So you therefore have to debit again another $350 for it to look like it. So essentially, to correct this error, what you have to do when you've posted to the wrong side, but the correct amount, what you have to do is to double that amount, right? And put it on the opposite side. So you would have had it on the credit side, right? But it should be on the debit side. So what we did, we doubled the amount and we got 700 and we are debiting it, and it's gonna look like what it should have been. So the entries for this is a debit of $700 to rent expense, and the other side of this error, because it is an error, is a credit to our suspense account. And we're showing what it looks like here in our suspense account, where we're having a credit of $700 in our suspense account. Remember, in your rent expense, you would have had a debit of 700, right? Let's continue. A $6,900 credit to service revenue was not posted, right? So here, one part is already posted, one part of the transaction, but the $6,900 credit to service revenue was not posted. So the error is in your service revenue account, and we know service revenue, it has a credit balance. So on your credit balance, there was nothing, but you should have had a $6,900 balance. How are we gonna correct that? You didn't post it. So all we're gonna do is to post it, right? By crediting service revenue and debiting or suspense $6,900, right? And this is how it looks in our suspense account. Let's move on to the next. A $600 debit to accounts receivable was posted as $60. What does this look like? So our current error in our accounts receivables, we know that has a debit balance, and it says a $600 debit. So what it should have looked like was $600 on your debit side. But what you had, the current error, is that you have $60 on the debit side. So here it's on the correct side, but it's the incorrect amount. So what we're going to do, we're going to have to increase this to 600. So what we do is find the difference and debit it. So the difference here is it's short by $540, right? So in order to make our accounts receivables account look like what it should be, look like a $600 debit rather than a $60 debit, we find a difference of $540 and debit that amount. So we're going to be debiting our account receivable, $540, and the opposite side to this transactional error is a credit to our suspense account. I hope we're following. And this is what it looks like in our suspense with the $540 being on the credit side, right? Let's continue. The balance of utilities expense is understated by $60. Let's look at what this looks like. So our current error and what it should be. So it says that your utilities expense, we know that's a expense account as it says, and it usually has a debit balance, right? So what it should be, it should have been 660, but it's understated in our current error by 60. So what we have is $660 less. So how do we correct that, right? What we do is to debit the amount that it's understated by. And if you would have closed it, you would have gotten it to be what it should be, which is a debit of 660. So to correct this, to journalize this error, we'll be debiting or utilities expense 60 and crediting for suspense 60, right? And we're showing what our suspense account looks like. So our next error, this is saying a $100 purchase of supplies on account, right? It was neither journalized nor posted. So here, are we having to do anything with suspense? No, let me answer that for you. Why? This is saying that no parts of this transaction was recorded. It was neither journalized nor posted. Unlike the others, it is telling you what part was not posted. So it's an error. This is more of something that was completely left out. Still an error, but not an error that requires you using suspense. Right? You would be using suspense for the utilities, the balance in that one account, right, was understated. The other part of the transaction before this understatement was recorded and it was correct. The debit to account receivables, right? The other part to that transaction was done and done correctly, right? The next one we're looking at the 6,900 to service revenue. That part was not posted. So all these errors that we'd have done before, a part of it would have been done and could have been done correctly. Hence why we would have used suspense. However, in the case of F, the purchase of supplies on account, nothing was done to it. It was neither journalized nor posted. So no part of the transaction was done. So here, we're not using suspense, but we're using our knowledge of how to journalize transactions here. So you purchased what? Supplies. Supplies is an asset. So when supplies increases, we will debit. So we're debiting our supplies account. How did we make the purchase? On account. So it's some payable. That's a liability. Liabilities increase, we credit. So here, the journal for this is a debit to supplies of 1,000 and a credit to accounts payable of 100. My apologies, right? So here you would have opened the T account, as I said, and put the respective amounts on the correct sides. But as I said, I'm only showing you here the suspense. You can do that and you can put it in our comment section or send us a DM or an email and we will definitely look at it for you. But this is a journal entry. There is no suspense to be updated, so we won't be doing that part, right? So let's move on to the last error detected. The error detected was that exploration equipment, right, should be listed in the amount of 21,300. So it said listed. That should be the closing figure. So let's look at our trial balance that we have and see what it was listed at. It was listed at here at 22,300. So it was overstated. It's an asset. So it would mean that you would have debited it more than it should have been, right? And here we found the difference of how much. It's a difference of 1,000, right? So to reduce this asset value, right, we would need to credit the asset. So the entry here is a credit to the asset account of 1,000. And because the opposite of this would have been done and worked out and everything would have been done, right? We're incorporating suspense in this transaction. So it would be a debit to suspense of 1,000. So we would have put that in our suspense account. So we would have looked at all our errors and we would have done the necessary journals and the ledgers for it. So we're here at the suspense account. And remember, I said that the suspense account should close on its own. So let us close the suspense account and see. To close an account, remember what we do? We add both the credit and the debit side, right? And if you look here, we would have seen that just by adding both sides, we would have gotten it to equal 8,900 on both sides, and that is closing the account. No finding any difference and putting the smaller on the difference on the lesser side. No, none of that. Once you finish detected and journalize and place all the correct entries to your suspense account, it should close, capiche, on its own, right? So we've closed the suspense account. Let's continue. So we would have done the necessary journal entries to correct the error, and we close our suspense. The next part is to prepare the corrected trial balance for the period. And remember, how we get the figures for a trial balance is by closing our individual ledgers, and on whatever side that balance is, that's the side we're putting it on in our trial balance. So here, you would have had all these accounts that's in a trial balance. Some you updated, some you didn't. Right, for the ones you updated, as I had said before, even though we didn't do it in the video, we would have had to open the account again with the balance that's in the trial balance and put the correction in it. So let's look at what our corrected trial balance would look like, right? So we have our old one. We have our journals that we did with corrections made to the accounts in our old trial balance, and here we have the new one. So how do we get from the old to the new? There is two ways you can do it, right? And as I said, you have the way that we didn't do it, but where you would open each account and whatever corrections you made, you would have adjusted it and then closed the account. So let's look at one of these. Let's look at cash. So from the cash had a debit balance. In our old trial balance we're looking at, it had a debit balance of 6,200, right? And from our journals, we would have known that we credited cash 1,000. So we have our balance 6,200 on the debit side. And we go to our journal entries and we saw that we made an adjustment to cash. We corrected an error and it was a credit to cash of 1,000, right? Was there anything else for cash? No, that was the only thing. So how are we going to close the cash account, right? So we have a debit 6,200, a credit 1,000, and we have the steps to close at the account. So it says the first step, total both sides of the T account. So when we would have total both sides, we have on our debit side 6,200 and the credit side 1,000. And it says after you total, you find the larger of the two. The larger of the two here is the 6,200, right? And what we do after that is to place the larger total in the total box on both the debit and the credit side. And that's what you're seeing here with the double underlining, right? The next thing, calculate the difference between the two totals obtained in part one. Part one was where we initially total both sides. So our difference here is 6,200 and 1,000. Our difference is 5,200, right? The next thing it says is to insert that difference found on the side of the lesser of the two to amount to the total of 6,200, calling this the balancing figure, which is balance CF. So that difference, we're putting it on the side, which is the lesser of the two. Which side was the lesser of the two? The side with 1,000 or credit side. So that's the side we're putting this difference on to equal to total what we have in our total box. So both sides now are actually equal if we're supposed to add them again. After we've done that, we're going to carry that balance down on the opposite side and call it our balance BF. We would have done this in our prior video. So our balance CF is on our credit side. So we're going to carry that diagonally on the opposite side and call it our balance BF, right? And we would have done that there. So remember, this is the figure that we are carrying to our trial balance. And we're putting it on the same side that it is on in our trial balance. So in our cash account, this is on the debit side, a balance of 5,200. So this is what you should see in the new trial balance. And that's what we're seeing for cash, a debit balance of 5,200. So as I said, this is what you would do for all your accounts, especially for the ones that you would have made an adjustment to or corrected something for. Another way to do it is simply by looking at your old trial balance and the errors that you have. So let's look at the next error would be to rent expense, right? So let's find rent expense in our old trial balance. We're seeing here where it has a debit balance of 500. What did we correct here? We said that we would have debited it 700. So we're seeing that they're on the same sides, right? Debits. If they're on the same sides, all we would simply do is to sum the amounts and keep it on the same side, taking it to your new trial balance. So here you're seeing your rent expense, the sum of 500 and 700, 1200 in your new trial balance, right? Let's look at one that we credited, and that is service revenue. So service revenue in our old trial balance is saying 4,900, right? What we did in our journal entries, we credited it 4,900. They're on the same side. Yes. So again, what we're doing is summing both and keeping the side that it's on. And in our new trial balance, our service revenue would have been 11,800, right? So in doing all of this, at the end of it, your new trial balance must now be balanced. And our balancing figure that we have here is 83,700. So you can choose to do it either ways. One, as you would not, saves you time, but the other one ensures that you get it correctly. So continue practicing some more questions until you're able to do the faster way. So this is the end of our question. You would have done all the entries, updated them, and gotten it to balance. So if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. You can always send us an email or a DM. Remember to like this video, share it with someone, subscribe to our channel so that you'll be notified whenever we have another video. And the next video that we have, the next tutorial question, is one that you really want to be a part of because it's a full question, it's a complete question. It's one of those exam type questions that will possibly help you